Anyway, welcome members and members of the public to the planning committee for March. You must forgive my voice, so I'll try and speak as clearly as I can. If you hear the fire bell, it is for real. Please go downstairs and congregate on the top car park outside. If any person wishing not to be recorded, please let the committee clerk know when you're a speaker, and he'll avoid to record you. So anyway, we'll start the meeting properly. So item 1, apologies for absence. Angela.
Thank you. Apologies from Councillor Froggatt, Councillor Lees, Councillor O'Brien, Councillors Janet Rose. Substitute for Councillor Rose, Councillor Mark Wakeman. And I've got substitute as Colin Swindle for O'Brien, but I don't think he's right, does he?
Okay, thank you, Angela. So item 2, approval of minutes. I therefore move. Second, all those in favour, please show. That's been carried then. Item 3, interests. Anybody declaring interest in tonight's business? No? So in which case then we'll move swiftly on for item 5.1, which is the installation of 3 number roof mounted air source heat pumps and buffer tank and associated acoustic fencing at this building here at the town hall. We've no registered speakers on this. There's no late reps, so I'll go straight to Gina.
Thanks, Chair. So this planning application is seeking permission for the installation of some air source heat pumps to the roof of the town hall building. They're going to be located on the northwest facing section of the roof where the existing plant room is, and they're going to be attenuated by a noise attenuating fence as well. The fencing will be painted to match with the plant room. The purpose of the air source heat pump is to replace existing sort of outdated equipment that we've currently got. So the opportunity has been taken at this time to look at some more carbon efficient ways of heating the building. So these air source heat pumps will be looking at generating energy for the floors in the town hall. And there is a noise impact assessment that's been put with the application that just looks at whether there would be any noise issues with it, but with the attenuating fence it's demonstrated that there be no noise impact on any neighbouring properties. So we've made a recommendation to approve on this basis. Thank you.
Okay, members' questions? No? I'll go straight into debate then. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we had this debate on the Governance Committee last week, and I think it's a marvellous investment, really. And we're looking to all the green factors involved as well, so I'm happy to move it.
Okay, Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you. I'd like to second that as part of our climate change agenda and everything that we've said in the past. We've got to do things like this, so I'm very happy to second it. Thank you.
Anybody wishing to speak in debate? Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very, very pleased that we're going ahead with this. It's towards this target to be carbon free by 2030. So, yeah, I'm fully supportive of the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in debate? No? It's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? That's been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 5.2 is outline planning permission for mixed-use development of 200 houses, dwellings and a commercial development with approval being sought for exit at land south of Main Road, Brailsford. There is some late rep on this, so please read it and then we'll go to the speaker. Is everybody happy, or do you want a bit more time? Are you happy now? Okay. Right, the only person on my list is the agent, Mr. Andrew Stock, to speak in favour of the application. As you know, Andrew, you have 5 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. I note with disappointment the officer's recommendation of refusal, and I will respond to each of those reasons for refusal in turn. However, I'd first like to thank Derbyshire County Council, Archaeological Team and Highways teams for their recent proactive and constructive dialogue with regard to the outstanding technical matters. In view of their responses, as set out in their late representations, the third and fourth reasons for refusal have now been resolved. This leaves 2 subjective reasons for refusal. The first reason for refusal relates to the impact of the development on the Brailsford conservation area and the listed buildings to the east of the site. The submitted scheme has been carefully considered in terms of its relationship with their heritage assets and has been informed by a detailed heritage report. The value of the conservation area and the role of its setting have been acknowledged from the outset. The design approach has been driven by a desire to conserve and enhance the character and significance of the conservation area, with clear design principles and objectives established throughout the heritage report, the intention of which was to ensure the sensitive and attractive scheme. Adherence to these design principles can be made a condition of an outline approval, and the Council would have control over the final design details of our reserved matters application. We therefore remain firmly of the opinion that the site can be developed in a way which is sympathetic and complementary to the historic core of the village. The second reason for refusal relates to the scale of development and its potential harm to the character and appearance of the area. In terms of overall growth, the proposed development of 100 dwellings represents a modest contribution in overall household numbers in Brailsford itself. The scale of the amount of development is therefore not deemed to be excessive in this case. Nearly 40% of the site will be preserved as open space, with housing covering approximately 3 hectares of the overall site, with a density between 25 and 35 dwellings per hectare. Members who visited the site will have noted the successfully completed Avant Homes development opposite the site to the north of Main Road. This development has extended the village further west and is clearly visible from the site, the A52 and the public footpaths. This reflects the fact that Brailsford as a settlement has extended westwards in recent years, and this application provides a natural continuation of the built form opposite side on Main Road, extending no further west than the Avant Home scheme. The development therefore respects the character, identity and context of this part of the rural area. Whilst I respect the officer's judgment, it does appear that they are unwilling to accept the clear and significant public benefits associated with this scheme. In social terms, the development of 100 houses will contribute towards meeting district council's open market housing targets, with the provision of 30 affordable homes, a broad mix of homes for first-time buyers, families, the elderly and downsizers. In economic terms, the commercial development would look to address deficiencies in community facilities in the village as identified in the local plan. The development would also facilitate a small convenience shop, an office or a light industrial unit for local businesses, or even a community building. Direct and indirect employment generated during construction, council tax payments and the benefits to existing businesses for additional resident spend will also help sustain services within Brailsford. In environmental terms, the development will achieve 40% biodiversity net gain, 26% gain in hedgerows across the site, and will incorporate sustainable urban drainage systems. The tilted balance, as set out in paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework, is engaged as the Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites. This means that permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts would significantly outweigh the benefits. As discussed, we believe there are a number of significant economic, social and environmental benefits derived from this scheme. Therefore, when having regard to all matters raised and when assessed against the policies in the local plan and the NPPF, as considered as a whole, it is considered that planning permission should be granted. I therefore ask you to take a contrary view to your officers and support the application this evening. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. Right. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. This application is outlined for up to 100 dwelling houses with commercial development, with approval being sought for access, so all other matters are reserved. The application did originally propose a medical centre, but that has been omitted by the applicant, so it's just the commercial development aspect and the proposed houses. It's been further clarified that the commercial development proposed would be up to 500 metres squared, of which no more than 150 metres squares would be retail. So information has been received since the report was written, as you've just read, in regard to access to sustainable travel and archaeology. We have received responses from Derbyshire County Council, and they're set out in the late reps. The conclusion from that is that reasons 3 and 4 in the report for refusal are deleted because those technical matters have been resolved. Members visited the site yesterday, which is an arable field west of Brailsford in the conservation area, as we saw. Site is on the edge of Brailsford, and currently the council doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. Therefore, in principle, development for housing may be acceptable. Nevertheless, as set out in the report, the development is of a significant scale and on a site which is important for the setting of the village in landscape terms and the setting of the conservation area and listed buildings. Officers consider that this development would result in a significant harm to the setting of the conservation area and listed buildings, and would harm more generally the setting of the village and the care and appearance of the area, contrary to relevant policies in the development plan. The harm identified would mean that the tilted balance in favour of the development does not apply, as set out in the conclusion of the report. The application is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Questions? Councillor Burford.
Thank you. There are obviously concerns about the continued extension of Brailsford. It's been certainly from the parish council, who say that it's nearly 3 times the size as it was in 2013. So, just like to ask the planning officer, how much weight do we or should we give to that concern?
We have to primarily apply policies in the plan, and there isn't a set amount of development or a number of houses which may or may not be acceptable for Brailsford. So there's no figure I can point to and say whether that's been exceeded or not. However, it's a tier 3 settlement, and policies do allow for a more limited scale of development here, whereas we're looking at an application for up to 100 dwellings. So it's really a site assessment on the basis of what's in front of us in this application and whether this development in terms of its scale in this location is appropriate for Brailsford.
Any more? Councillor Bottle.
Thank you. If we build each side of major roads, we're creating settlements with large roads going through the middle of them. And I'm sure we don't want settlements with large roads going through the middle of them. I'm sure we would much rather, sometime later, someone's going to ask us for a bypass. You know, like, maybe they're not, but, you know, like, we're just making people's place of where they live not better. We're making the village not better. And I think we should think about this quite seriously. I think we should follow the officer recommendation.
Is there a question in this?
Yes, is there a policy about avoiding building both sides of a large road? That's where I was going with this. Sorry.
I'll take that question, Councillor Buttle. The policy in the plan requires an assessment of against character, well, an assessment as to whether this is appropriate in character and appearance terms. I think officers are clear in their assessment of this application that the character of existing development on the southern side of the A52 is distinctly different to, if you like, what I'd refer to as New Brailsford, which is where it's extended historically along Luke Lane and on that northern side. The historic core of the village has remained largely intact, and this will be a significant incursion in that respect. And in character and appearance terms, we feel it's an acceptable location for significant growth.
Thank you. That was a no, wasn't it?
In a roundabout way, yes.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Is there was this site ever in a prospective site for a local plan? And if so, what was can you recall what the evaluation was of that?
The site has been assessed in the Sheila more recently, and it's been determined to be undevelopable as part of that process. Whether the site has actually been formally considered as part of a local development plan process, I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Chris if he's aware of that.
Oh, well, don't worry about that. But so it's been assessed. I saw it was assessed as Sheila. I wasn't sure it was in the local plan. But can you recall what the reason for rejecting it as undevelopable was?
Heritage issues, impact on the landscape primarily.
So by refusing, we would be maintaining the previous opinion of the person who did the Sheila.
Yeah, it would be consistent with the Sheila.
Yeah.
Although obviously that isn't a formal decision. But it's something we could take into account. How much weight to give that is a matter for committee.
Right. Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Looking back, I think in the local plan, I think that site was never a local plan. The other side of the road was, but that side, because of the heritage factor, I should imagine. If we, same as Neil just said, if we build, use forming settlements and it's not good really. Brailsford's had an enormous lot of housing in the last few years, and I think this site is not acceptable. I agree with the officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Allison.
Yeah, I've just got a quick question about the response from Derbyshire County Council on the school numbers, because my son's just left Queggs, but it says that they've got a net capacity of 1,645 students.
Sorry, can you point to me where that is in the report?
It's on page, let's have a look, page 28. I wasn't aware their capacity was at 1645. I don't know if Councillor Archer knows more about that than I would.
Well, I would also think it wouldn't be that many. Obviously, the new block that's been built will have increased capacity, but I wouldn't know for sure if it's got it quite that high. I wouldn't have thought so, but I wouldn't know without checking.
Because the reason that I'm asking is because it's mentioned again in another report further on for the houses at Hullen Ward, and because of that reason, they're saying there's no contribution required for school places. So it just seems very high to me, and I don't know whether that needs to be checked or not. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Donnelly.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, the thing that I'm disappointed with the admission of the surgery, because my understanding is that the Brailsford have been crying out for a new surgery for a long, long time now, and there's no provision in this at all has been admitted. Chris, the question I would ask you, how does that fit into the neighbourhood plan?
The development is contrary to the neighbourhood plan for reasons set out in the report. With regards to the medical centre, officers have explored the provision of medical centre on the site in terms of what weight do we give that in a planning balance. The medical facility is currently oversubscribed, but it may be that the provision of additional consulting room would provide sufficient capacity to accommodate for the additional growth proposed here. The aspirations of this site are for a much larger facility, which would serve a larger geographical area. So you've got to think, well, is this a suitable location for such a facility? To provide a wide range of potentially medical services for the wider catchment. Is it a sustainable location for that? But there isn't any appetite for that in terms of the response we've had from the Integrated Care Board. They've in lieu of provision on site, they're asking for an off-site contribution to help develop services and improve capacity elsewhere.
Okay, I've got nobody else down for questions, so moving to debate. Councillor Burford.
Well, I think the officers have got it spot on this one, and I am happy to propose recommendation of refusal. I think going on the site visit yesterday, it was very clear how the this development would harm the setting of the conservation area. We made sure that we saw the dwellings that are listed, and as always, we're trying to look as a planning committee, aren't we, at the benefits of a development weighed against the harm that that development would cause. And I think the officers have got it spot on here that the benefits do not outweigh the harm.
So you're happy to move it?
I'm happy to move it.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second refusal. Just a comment, really. I really don't like it when we come to planning commission. We've got 10 pages of late reps. There's enough on the website, and there's enough warning to everybody out there to get these things and responses in good time. And I really don't like reading these things and trying to get our heads around them at the last minute, because we had the agent and saying one thing and then Adam refuting it. I don't think that's fair on us as members and as the public as well. I think for various reasons that have all been stated, the medical centre's obviously got to be rethought in Brailsford. I'm aware of the issues there as well. And the development has been on the other side of the road going up Luke Lane that we've all had copious meetings about as well. So I'm happy to second this for the reasons that the officer has outlined. I'd like to thank Adam for his very, very thorough report, which is fair to everyone on this side. But be warned, this site, if we don't get our numbers sorted out, this site may well come back. So I'd suggest that the good people of Brailsford keep an eye on it and keep their powder dry.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to agree with Mrs. Bedford, so I was going to second it, but I'm happy to support it, yeah. What's the recommendation?
Okay, anybody else wishing to speak in debate? No? So it's been moved and seconded. For refusal as set out. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So that's been refused unanimously. Moving swiftly on. Item 5.3, which is erection of rear extension to create residential annex with roof terrace and associated landscaping works. Range Home Road, Matlock Bath. There is a bit of late rep, so I'll read them first.
There's a lot here, isn't there?
It's going to be used for the holiday beds. It's an amenity, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an amenity issue. So the fact is it's within the bound.
The house is sort of there, and then there's parking.
Everybody happy? Councillor Burfoot, are you happy?
Yes, thank you.
Right. In which case then we'll move on to the speakers. The first is Miss Bo Hamilton Cody. You have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's seconds left. You just have to press the button. That's it.
Is that it?
Away you go.
Okay. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm representing the 14 plus residents within the neighbourhood who've objected to this planning application. The objectors are all disappointed to see that this application is recommended for approval, the reasons for which will become apparent. The largest concern by all objectors is that of parking, which is already an issue on Home Road. I am aware that both the case officer, Mr Baldwin, and the committee members will have had the opportunity to visit the site of the proposed application. These visits will no doubt have taken place on weekdays in winter, which does not reflect the true problem related to parking, which occurs at evenings, weekends, and increasingly during school holidays or public holidays. Mr Baldwin states in his report, and I quote, that the level of vehicular parking required for this dwelling cannot be accommodated by the 2 existing off-street parking spaces, and therefore some additional parking is required on the street or in the local public car parks. Mr Baldwin also states that the extension will not increase the current requirements for parking, and this is supported in the report submitted by Highways. However, as members can see from email correspondence between myself and Mr Baldwin, the original planning application for the Grange in 1996 provided 3 parking spaces and 2 garage spaces. That's 5. Condition 3 of that 1996 approved application states, and I quote, that those facilities shall thereafter be retained in perpetuity, free of obstruction for these purposes, unquote. Mr Baldwin also advised that the parking provided with the dwellings included the garage, which should therefore be retained for parking. As members of the committee will have noted via the objections and also from their site visit, the garage at the Grange has been converted into a self-contained holiday annex, which is currently advertised on a number of holiday letting sites and not for use by Mr Atkinson or his family. This conversion has reduced the amount of parking facility available, leaving the small driveway only. This is why, as Mr Baldwin states in his report, the vehicular parking cannot be accommodated off-street, and so therefore 2 street spaces are needed. The 2 street spaces which would have been in the now converted garage, and spaces which now add further issues to the already difficult parking situation on Home Road. As I understand it, the garage conversion is therefore in breach of the original 1996 planning approval. Mr Baldwin also advised me in his email that the reduction in parking, despite the original conditions made, would be highlighted.
30 seconds left.
Would be highlighted to Highways and discussed as part of this application. I am unable to find any comments from Highways in their report with specific regard to the loss of the garage parking or the breach of the previous planning conditions and the impact this has on available parking for the property or indeed the street available parking. I hope that the committee will seriously consider the breach of the original condition, i.e. the garage conversion to the holiday accommodation, and I hope that this will not set a precedent for DDDC in relation to historic planning applications being breached without consequence. Thank you for your time.
Spot on. Right. The next on my list is Miss Lizzie Watts. Local resident, speak against it. You have 3 minutes, and I'll croak when you've got 30 seconds left. You need to press it, that's it.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm the neighbour downhill of the Grange. When we discussed this proposed extension with our neighbours some months back, we said then we had no objection to a single-storey extension that wasn't overbearing in nature, reduced our privacy, or came too close to our boundary wall, as the Grange is retained by a high-level wall which sits less than 1 metre from our gable end. Our objection letter details our full concerns. For now, I would like to highlight to the committee some of the factors I feel are woefully missing from the architect's submitted plans and the impact of the necessary building works to achieve this design. The proposed extension is now 2 stories and will have a considerable negative impact on our amenity and privacy due to the very overbearing nature and bulk of the design. In particular, the first floor roof terrace with extended windows will have a massive impact on our existing privacy from the back of our house to the very bottom of our garden. The architect's drawings make no reference to the properties on either side of the Grange, with no sectional drawings submitted to show more clearly the relationship the current building or proposed extension or its foundations have to its neighbours. I'd like to refer you to the 2 pictures. That one of it is an illustration which shows our house as a green bank and trees, and nothing on another plan.
I'm sorry, I won't allow.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realise that. Okay, but you will have seen those that make no reference to the buildings next door. I understand that the committee will have made a site visit, but viewing from the street level will not have allowed you to fully appreciate how the houses sit in relation to each other, or the steep gradient of the land, north to south and east to west. The photos submitted to committee by the case officer do not give a clear or accurate view of the relationship of the Grange to either of its neighbouring houses, and this makes it difficult to imagine the true impact of such a large extension. One of my greatest worries is the impact building works will have on the limestone rubble retaining wall between our houses, which at the highest point is approximately 7 metres and sits less than 1 metre from our property. We have been maintaining this wall for over 20 years, having to rebuild sections on many occasions because of crumbling and loose stonework. There is already existing access to the lower garden level of the range on the upper side of their house, but this new design proposes a secondary staircase which comes right up to our boundary wall, which I just wouldn't agree to in party wall terms because of my concerns about the impact of heavy and long-term building works on the stability of this wall.
30 seconds.
New steps would need a balustrade and handrail, which is not detailed on the architect's drawings. It's a very long drop down to that wall on, to our side. In the revised drawings, the proposal still shows, and I quote the case officer, an elevated walkway from the front of the dwelling to the rear of the property, such that we would 4 views to the neighbouring properties, giving significantly reducing the privacy of the neighbouring occupants. The case officer is incorrect in reporting that this walkway has been removed from drawings because it has not. My plea, therefore, is that this proposal is given serious further consideration before going any further in the planning process.
Thank you. The next on my list is Councillor David Mowie, Matlock Bath Parish Council. You have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I'm a Parish Councillor for Matlock Bath. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the Parish Council and on behalf of quite a number of residents who've expressed their opinions. Since the officer made their report on this case, quite a number of material considerations appear to have come up that I don't think are included in the report. I haven't read the late reps, so I don't really understand what may have been swept up by that, but it would appear that there are 4 major issues that haven't been dealt with yet. My headline, I guess, is that I don't believe the committee have yet got the information they can make a robust decision, and that perhaps a decision should be made to slide this decision to the next meeting. We understand that the applicant and both neighbours have discussed this case, and we're in agreement about what could happen, and I would suggest that there needs to be a further dialogue there. I think that there is a compromise here, but at this moment in time what we've got is not what was discussed and appears to be going into areas that haven't yet been fully considered. One of the big considerations is ecology. The architect reports that the extension sits in front of a number of trees, in fact nestled in amongst the trees. The foundations for this extension are going to disturb those trees. There hasn't been any ecology or consideration given to how that may work. There's also a large number of bats used, the gaps between these houses coming down. I understand that Derbyshire Wildlife Trust have written to Derbyshire District Council planners about this and recommend emergence surveys. These emergence surveys haven't been done. We don't yet have that data. I don't think there's enough information in front of you today to make that decision, and I firmly believe that it should slide to a later meeting. Construction work, when it happens, we understand that there's from the sections of the ground and the depth of the ground that needs to be dug out, there's a considerable amount of soil needs to be dug out from this site. The road, as you saw yesterday when you went to see the site, is steep and single track and heavily parked. I can't see how you're going to remove probably 200 tonnes of soil are from this site. And whatever that, I mean, I don't know whether that's a real number, but a substantial amount of soil must be removed from this site. There's going to need to be diggers on the back garden. There's no way down to get to the back garden. It may need craneage. It may need piling rigs. I do not know. But either way, there's a lot of heavy equipment. It's not uncommon for planning applications to have a condition applied which recommends that the council has to sign off construction work and methods of how these sites are built in the meantime. So just to reiterate, I believe the planning committee cannot make the decision here and should give consideration to sliding it to a later meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next on my list is Mr. Stuart Atkinson, the applicant. You have 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left. Can you turn the microphone on, please?
Hello.
Now.
Good evening. We think we've got an exciting project here, a project which will create a building in the garden which will be largely invisible to the neighbours and to anybody else. Okay. The objective when we decided to do this was to connect the house with the back garden. Currently, you can't access the garden from the house without walking round and downstairs. So because of that, the garden's kind of got into a state of disrepair. But we believe that when we connect the two, if we're given permission to connect the two, we will create a more private space in the garden by planting more trees and having bigger plants, etc. Because we want to create a sort of forest type of situation where you're in the garden, not looking out. So it's not our intention to look out at the neighbours. We believe that this will improve our home for ourselves, for our guests and family. Now the plan that we've put forward provides access to the garden from the rear of the house at the bottom of the stairs. 24 years ago, when we moved in, we created a garden immediately. Originally, it was just a slope. Okay, so we put in, we built walls, we put in a terrace, we put in decking, etc. And it was a brilliant place for my children to play, and the neighbours to play. But like I say, it's got into a bit of a state of disrepair. The proposed garden room will be effectively a glorified conservatory, but it'll also function as a separate apartment if and when required, as an aid to multi-generational living. I live there with my son. You know, I don't know what might happen with my daughter in future, etc. But I realise that we've got a house that we've lived in for a long time, and I'd like to live there for a long time in future. The roof of the garden room will provide a terrace to 2 front bedrooms, which will provide an upgraded experience for guests when they stay. And the intention is that they're quite private because there's a pergola around it. It's a single-storey extension, by the way. We do run an Airbnb. We did this as a way of making money. When my late wife was ill, I had to spend 3 years looking after her. It meant that I was her primary carer, and I didn't have any other way of making any income. And it seemed obvious, living in Matlock Bath, where there's a need for holiday accommodation, to do that. But we enjoy it. We enjoy the social element of it. We like meeting people, but we also realise that it's a big benefit to the community, because people who stay with us, they visit bars, restaurants, all the attractions, Heights of Abraham, etc. They all use those. But Airbnb isn't all we do. My son is studying to be a mortgage broker, and I've been accepted at Derby University to study interior design. So the Airbnb aspect was a means to an end. we may continue with it, we may not, but it's not what defines what we're doing here. So, with your permission, we feel that this extension will benefit the neighbours because it will give them greater privacy. Currently, they don't have privacy. We look out over their gardens. They're right. We can see straight into their garden. They can see into ours. But with planting, that won't happen anymore. Our guests from Airbnb will enjoy a superior experience, and the house will be suitable for multi-generational living going forward. And it's important to point out that
30 seconds left.
It is our house. It's our home. It's where we live. And this will be better for us to enjoy the garden. This project is mostly about access to the garden. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You're taking this one.
Thank you, Chair. As we said, this is a house order application for extensions to create a residential annex with associated landscaping works. Members visited the site yesterday. Parking has been mentioned. We saw the existing parking arrangements on site, and we saw the road and the condition, the number of vehicles parked. Obviously, we were there about midday. In terms of number of parking spaces, it appears to be 2 parking spaces off the street for the property. It's correct to say that when planning permission was granted for the house, there was a planning condition imposed upon the garage. The planning condition required all parking facilities to be retained, and to my mind that would include the garage. Obviously the garage has been converted, and that appears to be in breach of that condition. Otherwise, that accommodation appears to be being run ancillary to the house, so in itself may not need planning permission other than this planning condition. However, having regard to the highway comments, it may be unlikely to be expedient to enforce against that breach of condition. You'll note from the highway comments that the highway authority did take into account that the garage has been converted in their comments, and they obviously made their comments on that basis. Members, as I said, we visited the site yesterday. We did go round the rear of the building and had a look at the relationship with neighbouring properties, and there are photos on the presentation which show that as well. The walkway around to the terrace has been omitted from the plans, but essentially the roof upon which that would run is still there. If necessary, members could impose a planning condition to require some sort of barrier to prevent access around there, but there would be nowhere to get to on that at the moment. There's no railing proposed. Ecology is the response from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust is in late reps. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust aren't a consultancy on this application, and normally for a householder application like this, it wouldn't be appropriate to have a protected species survey. There's no alterations to the roof or anything which would be likely on its face to affect bats. Therefore, we haven't requested a protected species survey for that reason. So the exposed extension is to the rear of the property, which is, as we saw yesterday, on a very sloping site. The extensions of a contemporary design, facing a mixture of render to match the property glass and charred timber. So essentially, the annex is set at below ground floor level, with the proposed terrace above, essentially at the ground floor level of the property. So living space that's proposed will be accessible through the house via a set of stairs. So amended plans have been sought to omit the elevated pathway and to omit the glazing to the elevation facing the neighbouring property to the east. And subject to those amended plans, officers consider that the design is acceptable and that amenity issues have been addressed, and taking into account highway authority comments that the development wouldn't harm highway safety. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, the parking, and I'm not going to argue with the need for what the county council has said, but is parking on a road a public benefit? Is it a public amenity? Is it available? Being able to park on a road, is that a public amenity?
Yeah, I think it's something which affects the amenity of the area, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that is, you are able to take that into account. Yeah.
So we could consider that if two car parking spaces are required on the road in addition to the ones on the side, then there's a loss of public amenity. Now, we understand from what we've discussed on previous planning applications and in the MPPF that public amenity is to be valued higher than private amenity. So when we're looking at this, we can look at the parking in two different ways. We can look at it in terms of the standard for parking, clearly, if you label rooms as offices, then it's within within the standard. But if we look at it in terms of public amenity, and I would agree with the lady who spoke about the time of day when the assessment of the parking was done, and midday in January or February is just not the time to assess when a private residential road a residential road is going to be busy. I suggest that that should be done at night when people have returned from work and the parking is more used. So I suggest that there is a considerable loss of public amenity associated with the possibility that the additional space will be used for Airbnbs. Would you like to comment on that?
I mean, you're entitled to take that into account and form your own judgment on that.
Thank you. Okay. In terms of the disruption of during building works, now it's a very narrow road, and as somebody said, there would probably be a need for a crane or significant to get diggers in and then to crane out the material from behind the site. So, has any estimate been given to the amount of time that there would need to block the road in order for material to be moved off-site during the construction phase and for delivery of materials?
No, we haven't assessed how long that would take. I mean, it would depend, as you say, on exactly who was undertaking the building works and what equipment they were using. Because as we had, I think at last committee, we had a few committees back, we had a property with no access at all, where you had potentially having a wheelbarrow or some very small equipment. So it depends on how it's done. We couldn't reasonably refuse an application on the basis of impacts because of construction works. I think if members were concerned about the potential impacts of construction works, you could put a planning condition in to agree a construction management plan, and that could deal with things like hours of operation and what vehicles are used and how banksmen are employed and things like that to minimise impact on residents.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeman.
Yeah, the garage hasn't got any permission at all for it to be a residential, and is that correct?
Yeah, so the garage has planning permission. The whole house was granted planning permission with the garage, and that planning permission had a planning condition requiring all parking facilities to be retained for that use. So that condition appears to be being breached at the moment because the garage has been converted. It's no longer available.
How long was that done, do we know?
I don't know the answer to that question, no. I think from what's been said, possibly a few years ago.
Can we make it go back to a garage?
That's something we would have to look at as a separate matter through enforcement.
Okay, Councillor Slack.
My question's just been answered, Mark's just asked my question. Just to add on to it, would you approve it if it was hurriedly let?
The garage?
Yeah.
I think the main issue from what's been said is amenity and highway safety, but I mean, I couldn't predetermine that application. The applicant could submit a planning application to remove that planning condition, and then we'd have to consider that on its merits.
So it could go either way, right?
I wouldn't want to predetermine that application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Buttle.
Thank you. I'm worrying about this big wall in down the middle, and there's mention of a Party Wall Act. Who decides whether or not something's safe, and do we have an option to get the construction company to, come up with a method of working with it? Because, you know, it's a very big lump of something or other which people will be living next door to, and it does look like a bit of a concern.
Yeah, just coming back on that, Councillor Buttle. Under the Party Wall Act, the applicant would have to serve notice on the adjoining property owner and reach agreement with them on the nature of construction on that boundary. It goes beyond planning considerations, but it is obviously a concern to the neighbour, and it's something that would have to be agreed, but it'd be separate to the planning decision on whether or not we grant permission for this extension.
So we can't ask that a Party Wall Act agreement is made
No,
as a condition?
It's separate provisions that would have to be adhered to as part of construction.
Okay. Councillor Burford.
Just going back to the about the former garage, I'm not really very sure about what the status is of this former garage, because if it needed planning permission and it hasn't got planning permission to be an Airbnb or some kind of self-catering, if that was to be refused, that would make a difference to the amount of, if it had to go back to a garage, that would make a big difference to this parking issue, wouldn't it? So I'm not clear. I'm really not. I'm confused about that.
Okay, I'll try and provide some clarity on that, but I may also confuse you on this, because it comes down to, well, what is the planning unit? So how is that accommodation being used? If it's being used in an ancillary manner to the main house and it represents a small component of its use, then you could argue, well, there's only one planning unit, and that planning unit is a dwelling house. So it becomes just a breach of condition. But we have got a clear steer from the Highway Authority that a dwelling house of the scale proposed with the extensions, the level of parking to serve that dwelling would be acceptable from a highway safety perspective. So the government guidance on when we should take enforcement action is fairly clear, that we shouldn't be taking enforcement action if the sole purpose is to regularise development that's acceptable on its merits, and that's the sort of position we'd be in here. If the accommodation was self-contained accommodation, and there was no personal connection between the occupants of that accommodation and the main dwelling house, then you could say, well, that's a separate planning unit. There's two planning units. It's effectively two dwelling houses, one being used as a holiday let and one being used as a dwelling house. My understanding is it's used in ancillary capacity to the main dwelling house, and is a small component, and therefore we are dealing with just one planning unit. So we are satisfied as officers that we are dealing with householder developments, and ultimately what we'd be left with is one planning unit.
Thanks. I have got another question, actually. Obviously, we went on site yesterday and we got so far down onto the decking, but we couldn't go any further. Now, can you just try and describe to us how the land falls down? I mean, are we talking if the space that this new build would take, are we then talking about maybe overdevelopment of a site where no further development could possibly take place because of the way that the land drops down? Does that make sense?
Yeah, in terms of this property's garden, it only extends not too far into the garden, so there would be still plenty of garden space left for this property. I think with this extension, it probably would be then difficult to add any further extension in the future. In terms of the relationship with neighbouring properties, the photos on the presentation are fairly good. This is from the neighbouring property that's below them. So this is at the side. We didn't get towards this corner, did we? We were on the other side with the property which was higher than us. So that's the sort of relationship. So if you're looking at that, if you see the stone on the lower part of the dwelling, the top of that stone is roughly the floor level which the terrace would project out at, and then the extension would be below that.
Okay, so we'll now move into debate. Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much. this is the value of site visits. For those of you in this room who haven't visited this site and actually been to where Councillor Burfoot was just suggesting on the dodgy decking, as I taught, as we sort of called it yesterday, you can't really sort of you can't really envisage it unless you actually see it on site. And this is, when I go to the National Park Planning meetings, I'm appalled at how few of the members there have gone to site visits, and I make that point in debate. In my mind, it is not overdevelopment, as some of the representations say. It's a natural progression, evolution of this particular property that was built in the 1990s. And now I've heard, so eloquently from the applicant, I get the proposal, because I didn't get it when we were on site yesterday, for those of us who were there. I understand, and everybody tonight has spoken very eloquently from their point of view, and made the relevant proposals. And I think this is where planning is so difficult. We've got to go down on one side or the other, and for me, having looked at it and seen, as you know, my tourism hat on, I understand the pressures on Matlock Bath, the pressures on these new social media avenues for accommodation through Airbnb and VBRO, etc. I understand that, and that is a very dicey road for the amount of traffic if everybody all has a car for every bedroom that is there, and I appreciate the people who live on there. But from a planning point of view, I think it's very difficult to overturn this or to vote it down, and I'd like to propose that we approve it as per the offerer's recommendation, with a very complete construction works programme, because I don't know how they're going to build it. I'm not a builder, and I don't get how that's going to be done, with full consultation, if it's possible, with the neighbours, to make sure that they still have a neighbourly relation on that road. So for those reasons, and for the officer report and those particular reasons, with that condition, I don't know how you want to word it, Chris and Adam, but to make sure there are suitable construction parameters for the construction of this, and the usual 9 to 5 or whatever it is, timings, etc., no weekends. I'd like to propose this is for approval.
Does that?
I'll second it on. Councillor Fitzherbert, would you be willing to also add to your condition that the road should remain open at all times, and there should be limits on the amount of space taken up by whatever vehicles?
I don't know if we're allowed to do that, but I think that would be in the construction details.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that would be a given, I hope.
Would that be
obviously it won't be for a couple of minutes like it is on any construction site when the skip turns up, whatever. But I think that's part of the construction remit. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Councillor Buttle.
Thank you. I was actually going to second this, because I know this is a bit weird, but I don't mind the odd Airbnb in comparison to cottages being taken over which were available for young families, and the odd garage here and there. I'm not worrying about it. So there we go. I was going to second it, but I'm not going to, but I shall support it.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak in debate? No. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I am sorry. You're not. Excuse me. I'm sorry. You can't speak when we're in debate. Excuse me. Excuse me. I've asked you, Bella. Excuse me.
You want me to speak?
Kerry.
Yeah, sorry, I know our chair is struggling at the moment. Party Wall Act, as you know, is between the owners of the two properties, and it will be for you to seek your own independent legal advice. Because it is a statute, and it does have guidance on the internet, and it's not within the planning remit to discuss Party Wall Act matters. So we're not saying that it's not important. It just has its own statute, and regulations follow it. Within the planning remit, it doesn't. It is a separate matter that has its own regulations, to go through, and it will be for you to contact your own solicitor to know what your rights are under the Party Wall Act.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for approval as set out with the conditions and the additional condition. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Any abstentions? Five. Right, it's gone 5-5. So, as the chair, I have the casting vote and a vote in favour for approval. So, it's been approved. Okay, moving swiftly on. Item 5.4, which is a application for outline planning consent for the erection of up to 15 dwellings and associated garaging, with approval being sought for access at land adjacent to Biggin Dog Lane, Hullen Ward. Now, there is some late reps, so I'll let you read that first. Diabetic, so not unless you want to be keeling over and all. Do you want a bit more time, members? Are we happy now? Okay. I have a number of speakers on this. So the first on my list is Mrs. Paula Groom, local resident, to speak against the application. You have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know somehow whether I croak or whatever when you've got 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I am a resident. I urge refusal for safety and sustainable reasons. The access is not safe or suitable. There are sustainability limitations here, and it is a greenfield site. The policies referred to are fully, if the policies are referred to are fully considered, there are no exceptional circumstances to tilt the balance for presumption in favour of approval outside a settlement boundary. The market availability exceeds demand. There's 42 homes currently under construction. The local population is increasing, but services have depleted. There still is no medical practice. The main practical means of travel for employment, health and basic needs is by car or delivery via the B517. This road is certainly not compatible for cycle use as a safe, sustainable alternative. There is pedestrian and disabled user discrimination. An alternative pedestrian pathway from the new site to the main road is suggested because there is no continuous path possible through the access route or serving plot 23. In part, pedestrians share space with vehicles. Safe, integrated, inclusive design allowing access to the play area and Wealdon Way development under construction is ignored. There is a lot of debate and concern about the vehicular access to this new site, and quite rightly so, due to passing emergency, refuse, delivery and maintenance vehicles, not to mention construction. The drive has not been constructed to withstand this. The swept pathway analysis provided merely highlights the limitations of the access, including obstruction, visibility, pedestrian and bay window conflicts, possibly with wing mirror dimensions not accounted for. Recommendations for a different housing mix indicates there will be 20 smaller dwellings, generating even greater traffic throughfare. Access and safety issues should not be reserved matters, especially in view of the legal issues in this particular case, and also taking reference to the late representations regarding the layout. It will be unchanged from the previous application, apart from the swept path analysis, which is contentious. Please refuse this application again on the grounds of safety and sustainability, or explore an alternative access route. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Right, the next on my list is Mr. Simon Groom. Not the one from Blue Peter.
I wish I got a pound for every time I was asked that.
You wouldn't have to work, probably.
Thank
Anyway,
you, Chair.
you have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Simon Groom. I'm a resident residing at plot 23 on the plan. I wish to object to the access route on safety grounds. The proposed access route is currently a quiet private drive serving 5 properties, enjoyed by families, some with young children living and playing there. They will be put at risk if the proposal goes ahead, and the amenity will be completely lost to them. The private drive would become a live road, now potentially accessing an additional 20 properties, not 15 as stated in the application, therefore further increasing the traffic movement. We have pedestrian access to our property directly onto this private drive at the moment. There is no footpath allowing safe pedestrian access to and from our home, plot 23. It will therefore not be safe to do so from either entrance to our property. Highways have stated for this reason the road will not be adopted. We require a safe pedestrian access whether the road is adopted or not. We will also be able to safely service our property, tend to our gardens or simply clean our windows. Highways accept that the available width and geometry is not within the locally adopted street guidelines, but still seem to be in favour. The application now seeks to call it a shared space. Changing the name does not solve the issue and now includes a 12-metre section where there is no pedestrian footpath at all. How can this be safe? The access route is extremely close to our home, within half a metre of a bay window. An open bay window would be at the edge of the live road. The proposed short curb access alongside our bay window attempts to address this, but does not. This simply creates a pinch point and yet more vehicle and pedestrian conflict, as vehicles may be forced onto the footpaths. The swept path analysis highlights this as shows vehicles at best hugging the curbs and having to swing out widely round the bends. It will also severely restrict the residents and visitors parking and the safe movement of their vehicles. During construction, thousands of tonnes of building machinery and materials will need to be brought in along this private drive and will be extremely dangerous and intolerable so close to the existing properties. The drive is also not constructed to withstand this. An alternative access route must be sought.
30 seconds left.
A similar application has already been refused, and I respectfully request you refuse this application on safety grounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, the next on my list is Councillor Arthur Champion, Hullen Ward Parish Council. You have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. Would you like to turn the speaker on? That's it.
All right, well, evening. I'm reporting on behalf of Peter Birkbeck, the chair of the council, who can't make it this evening. Hulland Ward Parish Council vigorously rejects the proposal for the following reasons. A. The application calls for development of a greenfield site, which is also outside the Derbyshire Dales local plan. B. With 101 houses already built or in the process of being built, Hulland Ward has more than satisfied the requirements of the local plan, which required 99 houses until 2033. C. The proposed access road to the proposed 15-house development is a single-track road over private ground, which has already been rejected for being unsafe, unadopted and unprofessional. D. The proposed application is adjacent to the only designated heritage site in the Hullen Ward area, which is the Christchurch Parish Church, and would impinge on the integrity of that building and its surroundings. An additional comment agreed at the Hullen Ward Parish Council meeting held on the 6th of March. As the Parish Council have serious concerns about this application, it was resolved that Councillor Birkbeck should attend the meeting and formally request that a feasibility study should be done for a roundabout on the A517 Dog Lane Junction to give new access to the site of the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last on my list is Miss Claire Preston, the agent, to speak in favour. You have 5 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Your officer's report identifies all relevant planning material considerations, clearly sets out the planning balance and arrives at a positive recommendation, which is welcomed. Our previous scheme was refused solely on the basis that the access to the development, by way of its restricted width, was not safe or suitable. In response, this resubmission is accompanied by a detailed highway report which corroborates the Highway Authority's view that the access arrangements across the site, across the right-of-way, are safe and suitable. The right-of-way measures 5.5 metres. The government document Manual for Streets confirms that a 4.8 metre wide carriageway is sufficient to allow a car and lorry to pass. As such, even accounting for the window to plot 23, which when fully open projects 10 centimetres over the carriageway, there remains more than sufficient room for the bin lorry or a fire engine to pass a car. The scheme utilises a short stretch of shared surface. These are actively encouraged by Manual for Streets and are widely regarded as reducing vehicle speeds and contributing positively towards highway safety.
We note that the access driveway would not be adoptable by the Highway Authority. However, as they have clearly pointed out in their consultation response, this does not mean it is unsafe. Had it been, then the Highway Authority would not be recommending that the application be approved. In preparing the resubmission, we tabled a revised access proposal which showed a traffic calming measure installed on the right-of-way, moving the carriageway clear of the opening window to plot 23. We did this not for safety reasons, but in an attempt to deliver betterment for its occupiers. However, residents have made it quite clear that this feature is unwanted and we would need the consent of neighbours to complete this on site. Please be assured that though if permission from the neighbours was to be granted, we would complete this feature and this is allowed for in the revised recommendation. We wish to make it clear again, however, that the build-out is unnecessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. In summary, this is a well-resolved scheme which will help to address the council's shortfall in housing land, whilst delivering a safe and suitable access. We would therefore encourage members to approve the scheme in line with Officer's recommendation, allowing additional costs associated with the ongoing appeal to be avoided by all parties. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. A number of matters to address from the previous speakers, but also just reflecting on what's in the late representation sheet as well. Members will be pleased to know there's a further item of late representation that's not included in the late representation sheet that was received at 4:20 today from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. So we have comments from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust which basically say they've reviewed the ecological information that accompanies the application. They've said that it's well detailed and the assessment and recommendations regarding habitats and protected species appear reasonable. They do go on to say that the biodiversity net gain assessment is outstanding and should be provided. And in that respect of that matter, I would draw members' attention to paragraph 7.30 of the officer's report. Having assessed this matter previously, and in recognition that the site provides little in terms of existing biodiversity offer, we feel that the condition which deals with that within the parameters of the existing application, which is up to 15 dwellings on this site, can be achieved and dealt with as part of a subsequent approved reserve matters application. So the advice in paragraph 7.30 of the officer's report remains in respect of that matter. Members will recall considering what is essentially the same development, albeit with changes to the access arrangement back in September last year, and the district council is considering at the moment, or has submitted a statement of case in relation to a parallel appeal that's been lodged in respect of that development. I'll just remind members of what the reason for refusal was in respect of that application. The development would be served by an access which, due to its close proximity to existing housing, width and lack of dedicated footways, would present access difficulties, lead to pedestrian and vehicular conflict, and will not provide a safe means of access by foot, thereby leading to danger and inconvenience to highway users, contrary to requirements of policies S4 and HC19. As mentioned by the agents on this application, the consideration of the previous application is a material consideration, and that was the sole reason for refusal. The site is on the edge of a Tier 3 settlement, and the local plan includes provisions whereby, or in the circumstances where the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, that we will give consideration to housing developments on the edge of Tier 1 to 3 settlements. So in principle, development on the site is considered to be acceptable. The site was identified as being developable as part of the recent call for sites exercise, and we're not considering the merits, or it'd amount to unreasonable behaviour, in my opinion, if we were to consider the planning merits of this application that go beyond the reasons for refusal in respect of the previous application. So considering the previous reason for refusal, the applicant has presented two scenarios to us. One is to maintain the proposed access arrangements, but they've presented additional swept path analysis to demonstrate that a car and a HGV vehicle could safely access the proposed development. But they've also presented a second option whereby a curb build out to the side of plot number 23 would basically restrict or narrow the carriageway at that point to prevent a car being parked opposite that property, and thereby maintain a wider access to serve the development. You'll note from the late representations that the applicants have set out their legal rights of access, and if the access was to be blocked by residents and access presented, then that would be a civil matter. But the applicant is satisfied that they can achieve suitable access to serve the development, and any parking or inconsiderate parking and blocking of that access would be something that would have to be raised either civilly or to the police as being a matter that's blocking access to property where you've got a legal right of access to that property. Happy to take questions at this stage. I'm pretty sure there'll be quite lots of questions about the acceptability of this development.
Okay, Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. The Highways Agency, the Highways Authority rather, have decided not to adopt this road. Therefore, the road is under the ownership of the residents. Is that correct? That's my first question.
It is, and it's not uncommon. So lots of developments that are approved across the district. Sometimes estate roads are adopted. Sometimes it's all of those estate roads. Sometimes it's part of the estate roads. But the intention here is for the roads not to be adopted. But adoption of roads is different to considerations to whether those roads are acceptable in highway safety terms. Whether or not they're adopted is irrelevant. It's whether they're safe.
Can I just come back on that, Chris? I know roads where they've unadopted and the residents have put barriers across legally. So they could legally put a barrier across and stop traffic going down here.
Well, I think
I've seen it in a few places.
I understand your position, Councillor Slack, but I think the applicants made their legal position clear in the late representations. They have a legal right of access to their land, and that would pass to future residents. So you couldn't block someone's legal right of access to their property.
Though it's owned by somebody else. Well, thank you.
The applicant's got a legal right of access to that land.
Councillor Burfield.
Just talking about the position of DCC Highways. I realise, Chris, that you're not a highways engineer, but I'm concerned, and I wonder whether you could elaborate and perhaps explain really clearly why DCC Highways say, and I quote, "It's unlikely that an adoptable layout could be achieved." I've always had concerns about unadopted roads. I really think there should be legally enforced that every road on an estate is adopted, and then we know exactly who's responsible. So that's the first question, please.
Yeah, just to provide some clarity on that. To the best of my knowledge, for a road to be built to adopted standards, it would need to meet the requirements of the Highway Authority, and that would at the very least include a particular width of carriageway, pedestrian footways, lighting, everything else. I think there's recognition here that there's inadequate space in order to be able to deliver a carriageway or an access that would meet adoptable standards for those reasons, but it doesn't mean it's unacceptable in highway safety terms.
So I think it's a question, but I am concerned about this idea of building out from the bay window at number 27. Having been on site, I do find it odd, if you like, if that's the right word, that was allowed to be built so close to the highway on the assumption that maybe there would never be another application. It just seems very odd to me. And I think it's somewhere in the report, or I'm not sure where, but anyway, I saw about access at the point of the bay window creates a serious bottleneck. Do you agree that would be the case, that there would be a bottleneck there?
I think in bottleneck it will narrow the carriageway, so you've only got a single route of access in and out of the site at that point, but you've got to have regard to the amount of development. We're dealing with 15 dwellings, and the amount of traffic associated with that amount of development isn't significant enough to sustain a recommendation of refusal. I think that's where the Highway Authority are coming from in their comments to officers. Just regarding the legal rights, so the applicant has clarified that they can't carry out construction on that private drive area without the permission of residents that have also got the right of access to use that area. So they've offered that up as an option, but residents would have to be in agreement with it. But their position is that the unrestricted or the unchanged access arrangement is acceptable from highway safety terms, but there is an alternative as well if residents were happy with that they could narrow the carriageway to maintain a particular width in perpetuity.
I just may come back. Do you agree with me that that's a kind of catch-22 situation? If there's a build out, then it's going to be like a bottleneck. If there isn't a build out, then they may have vehicles within whatever 2 inches of their bay window, meaning that they can't open the bay window.
Yeah, I accept that the road would be narrow. One of the options involves a narrowing of the road. It depends what you mean by bottleneck in terms of whether there'll be, a concentration of vehicles at any one time and queues to get in and out of the site. I think the nature of the development and the scale of it is such that vehicle flows will be relatively low to and from the development. So I think either option is acceptable. The benefit of the build out option is that you wouldn't have any conflict with, or you wouldn't have as much of a constrained carriageway in terms of you'd always have a particular width, and that would factor in the bay window being open as well. So it's potentially a better option in that respect.
Just the final thing. It seems to be clear from the report that the owner of that property is not going to allow this build out, and is that within his right to do that legally?
If my understanding of the late representations and legal position is there would have to be agreement from residents that also have a right of access of that area to to carry out the build out in that location. So if residents do not agree to that option, then they would revert back to the original access arrangement. So that's why if you in the late representations there's a recommended change to condition 21. So it includes both scenarios. So no dwelling can be occupied until the access has been delivered in accordance with either option and is available for use.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Is it right that you cannot condition something off site? So it would be impossible to condition this access mechanism because it's not on the site that's seeking planning an application.
It's within the red edge. The access forms part of the consideration of this application.
So you're saying that you can condition somebody to require them to build on somebody else's land?
Yes, you could apply to demolish the town hall if you wanted to, but it doesn't mean that you can do it. But what's happened here is the applicant has served notice on everyone with an interest. So they've served notice on residents that have a right of access.
So okay, Chris, thanks. So if they refused access, Chris, if they refused the possibility of building out, does this planning application revert to the previous planning application?
Could you just clarify that?
Well, how is in terms of access, how is this application different from the previous application? And if any changes to the access layout is refused, isn't it the same application and which we have already refused?
Yes, the difference being that this application is supported by additional information. So there's an addendum to the transport statement with tracking information which shows that a vehicle, a car and a HGV can safely access the site with or without the build out.
Right, and can it safely access the site when there's a 2-year-old on a tricycle going on a driveway, not a road? All the comments that you have made have been about vehicles and the safety of vehicles, and none of the comments you have made have been about children and the safety of toddlers who might come out of any of these family houses onto a shared drive, not a shared road. which you called it, a shared drive, Chris. This is, and can I ask you why you didn't include my comment in the refusal and the submission to the planning inspectorate about the safety of children on this shared driveway?
Yes. Officers worked with the members that put the motion on the table. So Councillor Purdy and Councillor Slack both participated in the council's case on that particular application.
Okay, Chair, I think I actually did ask for it to be included and it hasn't been. So I'm sorry, Chris, but this is cynical method of getting reapplying for this exactly the same planning permission as we had before, and it's a planning application which is very dangerous for the sorts of families that will live in the houses on the shared driveway, and I move that we refuse on the basis that it's all the original refusals from the previous application plus the danger to occupants of the houses either side from construction vehicles in the first place, from refuse vehicles, from any other vehicle that may be going to the 15 additional houses and over this shared driveway. I find it disgraceful that a developer should bring the same application to our committee a second time. It shows complete contempt for the committee. It shows complete contempt for the planning process. He should be letting it go through to the appeals process, not bringing the same application back with a few minor changes which he cannot enforce. Thank you.
Can I come back, Chair, on that? Yeah, just I accept your position on that, Councillor Hughes, and you're entitled to come to that conclusion. I think if members can just be mindful and just have regard to the statement that's been submitted with this application, the addendum, because it does clearly have regard to both vehicular and pedestrian movements. And what it says at paragraph 12 is the swept path assessment confirms that a large refuse vehicle and car can access the development without conflict and be an acceptable clearance between the carriageway and existing housing whilst leaving suitable space for pedestrian movements. So I think you need to have regard to that statement and the tracking information before coming to that conclusion.
Sorry, Chair. I am having cognizance of that, and a toddler on a tricycle would not be safe in those circumstances. And this is a sort of space that is ideal for children, little children, to play and to occupy for their own purpose. So the amenity of those children is severely affected by the opportunity that this development has to create excess lorry traffic and other vehicles that will traverse the shared driveway. I'm sorry, Chris, but it is disgraceful.
So you're moving it for refusal as set out. So I presume Councillor Slack, did you want to second that?
Yeah, I'll second that like I did last time.
I've still got a question, actually, that I want to ask.
We're still in questions, so you can still ask your question.
I'll still second it. Sorry, Jackie.
Chris.
So I'm coming back to the point.
Chris wants to come back on something.
Just very quickly, I think we've obviously got a motion on the table and that's been seconded. I just want to clarify what the reason for refusal is, just so we're clear on what members are voting on. If you can just...
The reason is the same as last time, but with the addition of the danger to children who would ordinarily be able to use this space as for play, because it is a private drive, effectively a private driveway at the moment. Albeit a shared private driveway. But in addition to that, there is then the loss of amenity for the householders either side of this driveway, and particularly for number 27, who will have vehicles going within inches of his windows.
Okay, I understand the condition. Sorry, the reason. I think if members can just be mindful that the access as it stands is a vehicle access to serve those 5 dwellings. So in terms of referring to it as amenity space, it is still an access. I'm just questioning the reasonableness of the reason. I think if you maintain the position that was adopted previously, I can understand that. But are you referring to the loss of amenity of that as a playing facility?
Yes.
Right.
Because that is how roads are used. Private driveways are used, even if they're shared driveways. They can be used for children to play out.
Okay, I understand your position. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a reasonable reason for refusal.
So it's not reasonable that children can play out on their private driveway? I'm sorry, Chris. I think this is.
Hughes.
I'm sorry, Chair. It is.
Look, stop shouting.
Okay.
Stop raising your voice. Take a chill pill. We understand where you're coming from. Councillor Allison.
Actually, so I've got a question. I'm coming back to the information that's been supplied by Derbyshire County Council around the places at Quegg School, because I've just checked on the government website, and according to the school's information service, they have a capacity of 1420. That's 1,420 pupils. So I don't know where you're getting this information from and how correct it is. And for that reason, I'd like this at least to be deferred until we get some correct information in the report.
It might be helpful if I just give members an update on the appeal. Because as part of the appeal, the applicant has had to submit a unilateral undertaking to secure the necessary developer contributions that will be required if the planning inspectorate and the appointed inspector decides to allow the appeal. Now, as part of that, the Education Authority have clarified their position, and it's agreed that an education contribution isn't required on the back of the application that's currently with the inspectorate. So the same would apply in relation to this application.
So why have we got this misinformation in the report then?
Well, it's information presented to us by the Education Authority. As Councillor Archer mentioned, there has been a recent extension to the school. It may be that capacity has increased as a result of that. We have to accept that information as being accurate. The Education Authority knows pupil projections and capacity of the schools, and that information should be accurate, particularly if they're changing their position from having requested a contribution to not now requesting such a contribution.
So they requested a contribution now, so that number is different then?
As part of the original application, there wasn't sufficient capacity at the time of assessment, so there was an education contribution required on the back of the application that was considered in September. But their position's changed, so they've carried out a new assessment, looked at pupil projections and pupils on roll.
All right, I get that. So the application that came forward for Doveridge in December asked for a contribution.
We are talking about an application.
I'm not interested.
Hullen Ward.
I'm talking about.
We are not talking about.
I'm talking about the contribution that was asked for Quegg School in December, after this application was determined. So what has changed? That's what I want to know.
My understanding is what has changed is the Education Authority have carried out a review of capacity of schools within their catchments and looked at pupil numbers and come to a reassessment, if you like, of where there is spare capacity and where there isn't, and they've revised their comments accordingly. So they must have updated their information.
Rob, do you want to share some?
Yeah, when the minutes came up earlier, I had a quick look. Year 7 to 11, there is a new pupil admission number for 2024, which I presume is now factoring in the new build. So the 7 to 11 numbers now coming at 1,305, and I'm not exactly sure what the sixth form numbers are, but I imagine there'll be around 300 in total in the sixth form, certainly close to that. So that would perhaps take it with the new extension to around that 1,600-ish number. So I would imagine it is to do with that. That is to do with the 2024 pupil admission number has been increased because of the extension. But it does seem odd that it was factored into this one, but not into a December one. So I absolutely understand Councillor Allison's point. But I don't know for sure, but from a little bit of research, that's why it seems to be the case, I'd say.
Yeah, I should imagine that's a county hall matter. Councillor Buttle.
I was going to ask something about the narrowness of roads and why it is that we're objecting to narrow roads. It was a question, And I would have thought a narrow road on a development was likely to reduce the speed of children reduce the speed of traffic passing children on tricycles. And we seem to be insisting on not having a build out and having a massive, great wide road so people can go charging along at 40 miles an hour or something, where maybe we might be better off if we have quite narrow roads. It's more philosophical than what have you, but I'm interested to see what's the appeal with the inspectors going to go with anyway. So if you could, Chris, I'll ask the question: do we like wide roads in principle on estates? And two, if the appeal goes against us, what is the point of this discussion?
So answering the second question first, we can't preempt what the inspector will make of members' decision to refuse the application back in 2022 September. In terms of whether I like narrow roads or wide roads, I think in this context, I mean, the problem is with adopted streets is they can often be overly engineered, and in this context, this scale of development, for me, an unadopted road with some narrowing traffic calming measures, I don't think will be unacceptable in both highway safety terms, but it can often offer benefits in terms of character and appearance and what the development looks like. A narrow road is more rural, isn't it, in appearance, rather than something that's overly engineered and perhaps something you'd expect to see in a more urban environment. So it's a matter of opinion, but I think in pure highway safety terms, it's considered to be acceptable.
Now, coming back to the your answer on the inspector, if we now pass this this application, won't we have wasted the inspector's time, and will he ask for some money?
No, the applicants made their position clear. What they've said is that they'll withdraw the appeal and they wouldn't apply for costs. And they have presented additional information to us to demonstrate that the access would be safe. So I don't think it would amount to unreasonable behaviour on members' part anyway. But the applicant has confirmed that the appeal would be withdrawn if the decision to approve was made.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott. Thank you, Chair, but my questions have been answered. Oh, good. And Councillor Archer, did you want to ask him an additional question?
Yeah, I think Councillor Burford's probably. Is there any way we can condition traffic calming measures of any type to make sure the traffic is slower for safety of pedestrians?
Highways, and they won't do them. She's an expert on highways now. Right, I've got nobody else now.
Do you want me to just answer that? Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to move into debate in a minute, Peter.
Chair, if I just come back to Councillor Archer there, if it is a reasonable suggestion, if you felt that the scale of development warranted traffic calming within the body of the site, it's something that could be conditioned if you felt it was appropriate. The narrowing of the road, I mean, we can't guarantee that option will ultimately be the option that would be delivered. So if you felt that if that was a potential outcome of granting planning permission and you want to see traffic calming elsewhere, then within the main body of the site, that's something that could be achieved.
Go on quick then, Sue.
Traffic calming. I mean, in general, Derbyshire County Council don't do sleeping policemen or whatever you call them. I call them sleeping policemen. But I'm just thinking, if these are unadopted roads, does that mean that whoever takes over the management of these roads can do basically what they want?
They can. So what would normally happen is that residents would pay into a management company that would maintain all of the open space and highways if they were not adopted. So any repairs and any alterations would have to be approved through the managing agent and by residents. But we can condition, if we felt that traffic calming measures were important, we could condition that they're delivered as part of the development and secured by planning condition.
I mean, traffic calming can include lots of other things besides sleeping policemen, of course. You know, build outs and priority and all that sort of thing. But I didn't know where that stood if it was an unadoptable highway.
We would effectively have control. So we'd ask for a scheme, and we'd have a look at that scheme and agree that with the developer.
Okay, so anyway, I'll move into debate. So, Councillor Hughes moved it, so I'll give him the option to speak first in debate.
I'd just say that to other councillors that this isn't a road, this is a driveway. It's a shared driveway, not a road. It's not constructed as a road. It's constructed as a driveway. It won't have the foundations that a road would have. Even if it was constructed as a shared space, then it would have foundations, suitable foundations for significant use by vehicles, but it won't. I just return to safety, and particularly the safety of children, and our desire to get children playing outside, not in their bedrooms, and this would stop children playing outside in their front gardens or their shared front garden, and that seems to be a huge loss of amenity for our children, and therefore it should be refused. Thank you.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with everything Councillor Hughes has said. Also, if this was never built as a free road, it was just to these 5 houses, that's all. It would never be built as a free road. So therefore the narrowness of it is obvious. And it's obvious, like, when they want to alter and twist the road away from the bay windows, it's obvious that they're clutching at straws. It's more or less the same application, really, but they're clutching at straws in trying to move it over and adjust it when they know very well that it's unacceptable to have traffic going down there. It's unsafe for heavy goods going down. Some of the wagons going down and big machines are going on site will be enormous, and it's not acceptable. And I stand by, seconded it, the previous application. I stand by, seconded it again. It would be very, very wrong to approve this, in my opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, again, we visited this on site. So we've been to this site, those of us who have visited, twice now, which is very interesting. And I'm really trying to get my head around why the bay window was built so close to the road in the first place. At the moment, there is access to the site, as it says in our late reps. You know, the site brings some access. You could take a big digger and dump along there if you're going to dig something in the field anyway, or big agricultural machinery through there anyway. And I find it very difficult. You know, I appreciate the safety concerns Councillor Hughes mentions, but I find it very difficult to find a material planning reason, unless Chris decides to be wrong, for us to turn this down. And yes, I thoroughly agree with one of the speakers of the parish council that a road in from the other side, because I know the road well, near the Millennium Hall at that junction with Dog Lane, might well be best with bollards at the gate that we witnessed yesterday, so that there were 2 ways into this site, and the no through road there, as it were. But we are where we are on this one, and the officers have taken into account, and this is from the solicitors, the applicants, and I'm afraid that I think we've got to go with officers on this one.
Okay, Councillor Archer.
Actually, what Councillor Fitzherbert said as well, I was thinking of saying as well, really. In principle, I do agree with what the proposer and seconder are saying. I have concerns, the same concerns as they do, but from what Chris has said, I also have concerns that whether or not they would amount to a genuine planning concern that could stand up in appeal and would not leave the council vulnerable to appeal. So I'm going to get one of those dilemmas where my sort of gut instinct is to go with the proposal to not approve this. But from a planning point of view, I'm not sure we could defend that decision. I think the ideal scenario would be to have the different access, as one of the speakers said. Is there any way we can try and make that happen, or is that completely out of our powers?
Yeah, I think you find it be a separate application. So anyway, I've got two more down on my list. Come on, Councillor Burfield.
Yeah. This is a really difficult one, actually, because I do agree with lots of things that Councillor Hughes has said and Councillor Slack, but I also see the difficult position that the planners are in. But having said that, somewhere along the line there was a big mistake made with that development in having that bay window inches away from a road where there can be vehicles going down, presumably bin lorries, delivery vehicles. Somewhere a big mistake was made there, and I'm inclined. In fact, I'm more than inclined. I'm going to support the recommendation to refuse this. I think we need to send a serious message to the developer that this is not acceptable, and if they are determined to use that field as for housing, then they've got to find another access point. So based on what, and I always realise that we have to consider what's in front of us, and that's what I'm considering. And on balance, I think it's a refusal for me.
Okay. So the list on my list is you, Neil, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you. I was about to say that really we've got to just take into account that somebody's living there with their window just by that road. If the developers had planned ahead, then they wouldn't be in this position. They brought this upon themselves, and they need to think a bit more about what they're doing. And I shall be voting against the development. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Donnelly, and then I'm going to the vote.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will second Councillor Fitzgerald's motion. I think has been seconded.
We've already got a motion on the table.
Councillor's proposal about yeah. Because I think it's a one, a very, very difficult one. I've been on the site as well before, and I think we're between a rock and a hard place really, but I will support Officer's recommendation.
So it's been moved and seconded for refusal as set out by Councillor Hughes and Councillor Slack for the reasons for refusal. So all in favour of refusal, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? So it's been refused. Anyway, a little bit of housekeeping now. So it's only for noting. So I'll move it for noting, which is the appeals. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, and thank you for your forbearance. Just write anybody down. And I'll see you in April for the last planning of this term.
Chair, can I just say, we enjoyed your chairmanship.
Again?
Yeah, I'm sorry your voice is going bad, but